peoples and in the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation in Treaty 3 territory. My name is Ian Mann. I will be the chair of the panel this morning. I'm joined on Zoom. Other members of the panel include Tracy Anderson and Diane Knight. The assessment department personnel is Justin Mikulek, and the administrative personnel today is Crystal Harlan and joined by Stephen Lund. To the Zoom participants of the hearing, please note you are placed in the waiting room until your property is called upon. When it is your turn, you will be admitted into the meeting. Kindly follow along with the City of Winnipeg's Board of Revision YouTube channel for the hearing process. Once the host admits you into the hearing, please close or mute your YouTube player. You will then be permitted to speak with respect to the property. Once your hearing is concluded, you can leave the meeting. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. Board of Revision is appointed annually by council and is independent of it and the city administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included in the board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will also have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all of the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today, and the session will close after all of the applications have been heard. The board will then deliberate in private and make its decision. You will receive the board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. We will be hearing items 2 through 7 on our docket today, and Mrs. Harlan, please affirm the assessors and the applicant's first applicant's testimony.
Mr. Assessor, would you state your full name, please?
Justin Mikulek.
Thank you. Do you affirm that the evidence you are about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Applicant, would you please state your full name?
Susan Sapanik.
Thank you. Do you affirm that the evidence you are about to give this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mikulek. We will turn to the first matter on the list, that being at 990 Bourtournais Street, street address. I understand that there is an application, or there's a request that the burden of proof be placed on the applicant pursuant to Section 53 of the Municipal Assessment Act.
Yes, that's correct, for failure to provide the request for income information.
Okay, thank you. Then if you can begin your presentation, please, by reading in the roll number and the administrative information, and then we'll go to the application pursuant to the Municipal Assessment Act.
Okay, so this is roll number 060-448-78000. We are requesting the burden of proof be placed on the applicant for non-cooperation. And you can see on the following page, page 2, we have our request for income information, which from the years 2019 to 2022 have not been received. And if you go to the bottom on page 8, I've provided that we've sent the mailer to the address on file of 301-394 Gertrude Avenue. So we request that it be applied to this property, the non-co-op.
Thank you, Ms. Panik. Have you any questions of Mr. Mikulek?
I do not. We're not contesting that the income information responses were not provided.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson, have you any questions? With
I have no
respect,
questions. No, sorry, I have no questions. That's fine.
Ms. Knight?
No, sir.
And I have no questions with respect to this aspect. And I see that given the, or I note that given the position of Ms. Sapanic, assuming you're not going to be calling any evidence with respect to the application? Ms. Sapanic?
No, sorry, I am going to present evidence, sorry, on the application for non-cooperation. No, I am not, sorry.
Okay, thank you very much. Then what we'll do is if we can go offline, please, and in camera, and we'll have a brief discussion. Thank you. I'd like to call the meeting back to order. Having heard the evidence presented with respect to the application for non-cooperation, we are decided that the burden of proof will shift to the applicant pursuant to section 53 sub 3 of the Municipal Assessment Act. And in that case, Ms. Sapanic, would you make your presentation, please, with respect to the street address 990 Victoria Street?
Yes. So the property consists of a 2.5-story masonry and wood frame apartment building built in 1969. There are 47 units in total in the building, 24 one-bedrooms and 23 two-bedrooms. The amenities included are 2 appliances, fridge and stove. You'll note the typo on the front page of my valuation. If you're following along, I have store instead of stove. And the through wall air conditioning. Water and heat is included in rent. In addition, each of the units has one no-cost parking stall. Tenants pay their own hydro. The property has a financial year end of December 31st. So had the property sold as of the reference date, the income and expenses for the 2022 calendar year would have been the basis for the market value. As a multifamily rental property, the property should be assessed using the income approach with market value equaling the net operating income over the appropriate capitalization rate. In terms of capitalization rate, in its overview of the mass appraisal model for income producing properties, the city of Winnipeg indicated a range of capitalization rates for multifamily from 3.5% to 7.9%, 7.95%, pardon me, with the 20th and 80th percentiles being 4.75 and 5.45%. In my written submission, I have included at Exhibit A and Exhibit B reported cap rates for the city of Winnipeg for multifamily low rise. Cushman Wakefield at Exhibit A indicates a range for the first quarter of 2023 of between 5 and 5.75%, and Colliers at Exhibit B for that same period, 5 to 6%. Given the ranges indicated in the by the city in their mass appraisal model and the reports by Cushman and Colliers, a 5.25% cap rate is appropriate in my submission. The property itself experienced a little greater vacancy than what I would consider the norm. The vacancy and rate collection for the subject property, according to the city of Winnipeg model, is 3.6. This property had about double that, in part because this property experienced a significant roof leak. The roof was replaced. It caused some disruption. And so because of that anomaly in terms of what the property experienced, I'm using the city of Winnipeg's 3.6% for the purposes of this calculation today. In terms of income, The property, as I had already mentioned, had 24 one-bedroom suites and 23 two-bedrooms. I've set out in the middle of page 2 of my written submission the actual income for the property in the 2022 calendar year. The total for the property was $551,704. I would note that the building is rent controlled, so that means that the rents cannot be increased or they're subject to the maximum rent increase set by the province guideline. This property didn't undergo a above guideline or rehabilitation type application, so it is sort of under rent control. In addition to the suite rental, the property earns some extra revenue from parking stalls and other miscellaneous fees. And for 2022, the parking stalls earned $720 for the year, and other miscellaneous fees were $3,524. So in terms of operating expenses, the city of Winnipeg indicated in their report on their mass appraisal model that the operating expenses ranged from 34.83% to 69.74%, with a median of 48.41. In 2021, the operating expenses for this property totaled $439,158, while in calendar 2022, the operating expenses totaled $506,098. The average of the 2 years was $472,627. This is about 94% of EGI, which is way above the range. And as I've sort of indicated, the property had some significant repairs in those 2 years. There was the roof. There were some issues with some concrete repairs that had to be done. We can't use the actual expenses in terms of for certain items. So what I've done, and it's at page 3 of my submission, is I've provided you with the actuals for 2021, the actuals for 2022, and my attempt to stabilize them in the third column. So going through those items, the first expense was insurance. I've used the 2022 year. It is more expensive or quite a bit higher than 2021. However, that insurance doesn't seem to be going down in the short term. And so my view was to take the 2022 figure. Property management is 5% of effective gross income. And you'll note that the stabilized number is higher than the other two. That's because in the actual 2021 and 2022, the vacancy was higher. And so when I applied the 3.6% vacancy, it is a lower amount. Which would mean vacancy being lower would result in a higher effective gross income. And so if you apply 5%, that was why that's higher. Professional fees, again, I've used 2022 actual. We don't expect those to be going down. I think that's a reasonable number. In terms of office supplies, advertising, hydro, heat, waste room, and that I've used averages. Security, I've used the actual. We're just finding that security costs are generally just going up at properties in general. And then in terms of maintenance repair line, I've used 1,300 per suite. which is in our experience a reasonable average for maintenance per suite for our apartment buildings. Maintenance supply, again, used average. Internet and telephone, I've used average. And the property taxes, I've used the actual, even though they were lower in 2022 than 2021. So when I've used those stabilized expenses, we get two I'm 287,810, which works out to 53.69 of EGI, which is in the range and therefore is in sort of a reasonable level. Applying those figures to my evaluation, which is sort of at the bottom of the page 3 of my written submission, the gross potential income of 551,704, applying the 3.6. I note that I have 4.3. Unfortunately, sometimes I used a precedent and didn't change that number. My apologies, but the figure actually is 3.6. I did double check that this morning. And then adding the other income, we get effective gross income of 536,087, applying the stabilized operating expenses that I've calculated above of 287,810, gives us a net operating income of 248,276, and applying the 5.2 cap rate gives us a value of 4,729,079, rounded. That's 4,729,000. And that is what my submission, the assessment should be based on fair market value. Subject to any questions, that is my submission.
Thank you, Mr. Michalak. Questions?
So how come the owner has decided to not submit this information to us?
I don't have an answer for that.
But you were able to acquire it?
Yes.
I mean, I guess going forward, it makes it easier for us to avoid these type of situations, right? Where we can make a more accurate valuation on the property. So the cap rate's in agreement with ours. So I mean, I guess don't have any other questions. The stabilization seems reasonable. I mean, we just have nothing to go off of for rent. So this is my first time seeing that information. Other than that, no more questions.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson, do you have any questions?
I have no questions at this time. Thank you.
Ms. Knight, questions?
I do not.
I have a question about the stabilized amounts with respect to your chart on page 3. You have actual amounts, Ms. Sapanic, and then an average on the maintenance repair of $1,300 a suite, and I understand that's an estimated amount just based on that amount per suite. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. The property management, that's a simple percentage of the effective gross income, correct? That changes from year to year.
Correct.
And that's just all it's based on is the 5% number that is referred to in your in that chart.
So the number in the chart, like I'll use the 28,790, should be, unless I've made a calculation here, it should be 5% of 536,087, where you see the effective gross income down below.
Okay, thank you. I don't have anything further. Mr. Michalak, your evidence, please.
Okay, so I'll just touch on, we have a 1969 year built, no effective age, 47 suites. in the, I guess this is like the Niagara neighborhood. Just to give you a picture of where it would be. Now, we don't have any disagreement on the cap rate. Ours is 5.25, so I can fast forward to that. That's not gonna be an issue. It would just be our income here that we have on page 3. Where we have 1,073 per unit because nothing was provided to us in terms of going off actuals. That I did try to provide some rental comps here of other similar properties in the market region. So you could see where we come in here on page 4, where we come in at 1,073 per unit. And then just the other properties that I was able to pull for comparison to show that from a model assessment standpoint, where our income was reasonable, that I didn't feel it was out of line with the rental comps. So it didn't really allow me any reason that I would need to lower it. And regarding the expenses at 46.85%, it's reasonable. However, I had nothing to go off of to justify why there would need to be a reduction because nothing had been submitted to us. So that's where we come in from a standpoint of estimated market value of 5,907,000. And I just included a picture on page 8. Again, it just shows kind of a picture of the property from the exterior. I tried to Google it to maybe see if there was any ads available where I could get pictures, but wasn't able to do so. And just our mailers here for the non-compliance. So outside of that, I really don't have anything else in terms of speaking to regarding this one.
Thank you. Ms. Knight, do you have any questions for Mr. Mikulik? I've
Would
jumped
you,
over. Ms. Sapanic, you have the opportunity.
sorry,
So-
yes,
Sorry, that my mistake.
Mr. Mikulik, would you agree that using the actual income and expenses is preferable to the comparables that you provided in a case like this?
Correct.
That's my only question. Thank you.
Now, Ms. Knight, questions?
so I'm gonna ask, would you be wanting to change the 5,907,000?
Yeah, you know what? I don't think it's unreasonable that if we have a broken down income and stabilized income, I'm not against changing that. However, like going forward with this property, if this is going to be an issue where we run into this issue again, I wouldn't be in favor of changing it. If this is kind of a repeat situation, but because this is the first time that I've seen this type of issue with this property, I mean, I don't see it being unreasonable to change it for the 1 year. But going forward, I would not be in favor of it.
What would you change it to then?
I'm in favor of using the applicant's income.
Okay, okay, that's what I wanted to know.
Yeah. So
Okay.
so I'm not opposed to that, and I think had this owner been submitting this information to us on a regular basis, it probably would have been able to be solved with a recommendation.
Right,
15
right.
months. So
Okay,
so yeah.
thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson, have you any questions?
No, sir. Actually, Ms. Knight covered it for me. Thank you.
And I don't have any questions either. Ms. Sapanic, any summary?
Not today. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Mikulik, summary?
No summary.
Thank you. Then we will conclude this matter and move on to the next matter, please. That being just a moment. Number 985 Winnipeg Road, and I see that there is as well an application for an allegation of non-compliance with respect to this property as well. So follow the same procedure as we did for the last property, please, Mr. Mikulik. If you can introduce the property and then move to the allegation of non-compliance, please.
Okay, so this is roll number 060-448-85000. We are requesting the burden of proof be placed on the applicant for non-cooperation. As you can see on page 2, again, the mailers being submitted from 2017 to 2020, and then no mailers from 2021 and 2022. So there's a lot of inconsistencies with the submission of the income and expenses, thus making it difficult to be able to review the value for site-specific appraisal. And you can see on page 11, I had just posted the signature that was sent to the same address as previous property that we have on file. I did post the up to the 2020 mailer. But that's all we had for information, and the expenses again were really quite high for maintenance and repair. I don't know if it's a similar situation as the previous one, because I think it's the same owner where there was a capital expenditure that had to be covered. But anyway, that's where we're going for the non-compliance, just with the inconsistency of submission of income and expense.
Thank you. I would caution that, I don't know if you're moving away from the microphone as you're just finishing your submission, but it was starting to fade
Okay.
out a little bit, but thank you. Ms. Panic, have you any questions of Mr. Michalak with respect to the allegation of non-compliance?
I do not.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson, have you any questions?
I have no questions.
Ms. Knight?
No, sir.
Perhaps just for clarification purposes, Mr. Michalak, the signature page has been included. I think we're all fairly familiar with the letter requesting the information, but can you confirm for us what manner of letter was sent that was delivered to this address?
The
Copy here.
Yeah, so it was the request for income and expense information.
Okay, thank you. That's my only question. Ms. Panic, your submission with respect to the allegation of non-compliance?
We're not contesting that there wasn't compliance for those 2 years.
Thank you. Mr. Michalak, any questions?
No questions.
Ms. Knight, any questions with respect to?
No, sir.
Okay, and Ms. Anderson?
No questions.
And I have no questions. If we can go offline and in camera, please, we'll have a discussion on this. Thank you. I'd like to call the meeting back to order. Oh.
We're good now.
Good to go?
Thank you.
We'll call this meeting back to order then. Having heard the evidence with respect to the allegation of non-compliance, we're satisfied that the burden of proof pursuant to section 53 sub 3 of Municipal Assessment Act should be shifted to the applicant in this matter. And so, Ms. Sapanic, if you can commence, please, with your presentation for 985 Wenatchee Road.
So this is going to sound a little like deja vu all over again. This building is actually shares a parking lot and is directly across from the at 990 Beternay. So you're going to find very much similar, because it's essentially the identical, or the sister building, I guess I could say. So the property consists of a 2.5-story masonry wood frame apartment building built in 1969. There are 47 units total, 24 one-bedrooms and 23 two-bedrooms. Amenities include 2 appliances, a fridge and stove, through-wall air conditioning, water heat is included in the rent. In addition, each unit has 1 no-cost parking stall. Tenants pay their own hydro. The property has a financial year end of December 31st. So had the property sold as of the reference date of April 1st, the income and expenses for the 2022 calendar year would have been the basis for market rent. As a multifamily rental property, the property should be assessed using the income approach method. In terms of cap rate selection, again, I've provided at Exhibit A and Exhibit B, Cushman Wakefield's reported first quarter 2023 cap rates for the city of Winnipeg low-rise buildings, multifamily low-rise buildings, and at Exhibit B, Colliers Canada reported first quarter 2023 multifamily low building cap rates for Winnipeg. And I've noted that at the bottom of my written submission, again, the city of Winnipeg's mass appraisal model provided that capitalization rates ranged from 3.5% to 7.95%, with the 20th and 80th percentiles being 4.75% to 5.45%. Given the ranges arrived at by the city of Winnipeg in their model, as well as the reported ranges by Cushman Wakefield and Colliers Canada, a 5.25 cap rate for this property will be used in this evaluation. Again, this property had some significant repairs. This building also had issues with its roof, which again, I think it was just a nature of the age of the property. So there was the vacancy was a little higher than what would have been sort of the norm for this period of time. And so again, I'm using the city of Winnipeg's model at 3.6% for vacancy. At the middle of page 2 of my written submission, I've provided the actual income for the property. So the gross suite income for the 2022 calendar year was $546,291. And this property had in 2022 some other miscellaneous fees of $2,816. In terms of the operating expenses, I have again provided a table showing the actuals for 2021 and actuals for 2022, and my attempt to stabilize them in the third column of the table that starts at the bottom of page 2 and then continues on to page 3. So again, for insurance, I've used the 2022 actual. For the property management, it's 5% of effective gross income. For professional fees, I've used the 2022 amount. For office supplies, advertising, hydro, water, sewer, heat, and waste and snow removal, I've used the average. For security, I've used the 2022 figure. Again, we're finding security expenses has increased and we're needing to maintain them. And then for maintenance and repair, again, I've used the nominal figure of $1,300 per suite because the actual expenses for this building were so high in both 2021 and 2022. I will make a comment on, just because it was raised earlier in the 2019 report, and again, the expenses were high. In that particular year, there was a sewer line below the property that broke, and that needed to be repaired. It doesn't impact this one, but this property, I guess, it is of an age where it seems to be requiring some significant repairs in order to maintain the property. And then for the caretaker, I've used the 2022 actual, going back to the table at page 3. For maintenance supplies, I've just used the average. For telephone average, and for the property taxes, I've used 2022, which were lower than 2021. So when I've the stabilized amount that I've arrived at for expenses was $288,379. I'll note that I've got here that that's 57% of EGI. Unfortunately, that was incorrect. The actual amount is 54.47% of EGI. My apologies for that error in my written submission. But whether it was 54 or 57, it's definitely in the range, and therefore it's reasonable. So we're going to use the stabilized amount as I've calculated in that table. So going down a little further on page 3, you'll see my evaluation using the gross potential income, actual income from the units is 546,291. Applying again, that should be 3.6% vacancy. The number is correct, 19,666. Other income of 2,806 gives us effective gross income of 529,431. Deducting the stabilized expenses of 288,379, we arrive at a net operating income of $241,052. And applying the 5.2% cap rate to that gives us a figure of $4,591,461. Rounded, it's 4,591,000, and that is what I am submitting is the fair market value as of the reference date, and that's what the assessed value should be. Subject to any questions, that is my submission.
Thank you, Mr. Michalak. Have you any questions?
So just regarding, is this proper, like building identical to the previous one then? Like same suite mix and everything?
It's yes, absolutely the same suite mix. It's the same construction. They're like almost like bookends or mirror images of each other.
Okay. So would like I just see the values less than previous? Like what's different on the
rents are slightly different because rents are rent controlled. There could be any number of reasons why along the years of rent control, there might be some minor variations on suite rentals because landlords can't sort of readjust the rents so I'll give you an example. If the landlord makes a mistake and doesn't give a notice of rent increase on a particular suite, the landlord can't sort of fix that the following year by taking the previous year's increase. If they've missed it in one year, they're stuck at a lower baseline. So that's I didn't do an in-depth analysis to see exactly why, but there's a slight variation.
And then the increase in expenses, like, do you know where that, because I just feel like they should probably, like, for a situation like this, we'd be going with the same type of expenses because they're sister properties that are run.
Again, there can be some variation from property to property in terms of different costs. One property, the tenants could use a little more water than the other property. I mean, when I look at from a percentage point of view, one was 53.69, the other was 50.47. That's 1 percentage point difference essentially, or less than. I mean, it's just a variation, I think.
Okay, those are all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Knight, have you any questions?
No, sir.
Ms. Anderson?
Just one. Your insurance costs on both properties actually have doubled in the year between 21 and 22. I know insurance costs go up, but is there another reason for that?
Not that I'm aware of. I know that the Insurance market is very tough. I know that we've just seen insurance costs go up across the board. I don't know. It's not like either of these buildings had a specific claim.
Okay, thank you. That's it for me.
And I have no questions. Mr. Michalak, your submission, please.
Okay, so again, 985 Winnequa Road, we went over the non-compliance, same type of building as the 990 Biterne, right beside each other, 1969 year built. Our income workup identical to the last one where it's 1,073 per unit we have for our model, identical value. I've provided the rental comps, again, that I was working with for this property because there was no submissions of the mailers. Cap rate, no, we don't need to touch on as they agree with our model cap. I guess it would just be that I would be in favor of reducing this one to the same value as what that I had mentioned for the prior property would be my only thing as we have these valued as identical from a assessment perspective. So I don't see why we couldn't do that for this property as well, have the same value as 990 Biterne. Which would be
What number do you want there then?
the 4,729,000
She's asking 4,951,000.
or 4 million. I thought it was, I had a different. She is 4,591,000.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
You're willing
I
to go
would
to
just be saying-
4,729,000.
yeah, so it would just be keeping the 4,729,000 for this property.
Okay.
And other than that, I don't have any other anything else to say regarding this one.
Thank you. Ms. Sapanik, is that, do you have any questions?
Again, Mr. Michalak, you would agree that using the actual income is preferable to a estimated model in a building that is under rent control?
If they had been submitting to us regularly, yes. I think by me requesting the same treatment as the other one for value, considering our situation, I don't think that that's unreasonable. So that's, I mean, it's still giving a sizable reduction and I don't see an issue with it.
That's my only question. Thank you.
Ms. Anderson, have you any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Ms. Knight?
No, sir.
Just one question, Mr. Michalak, and more on the procedural side. Your statement about being in agreement with reducing the valuation to 4,729,000. Can we take that as a verbal recommendation?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Then I have nothing further. Ms. Sapanik, any summary?
Not this morning. Thank you.
Mr. Michalak, any summary?
No summary, thank you.
Then that will conclude this matter. Thank you for your submissions, and we will turn to the next matter on the list, that being item number 4. Thank you, Ms. Pack. I believe that's the limit of your matters today.
It is. It is. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you. And if we can turn to number 4, and Mrs. Harlan, can we please affirm the applicant?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Mr. Applicant, would you please state your full name?
Trevor Smith.
Thank you. Do you affirm that the evidence you are about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. You may be seated.
And Mr. Michalak, we can turn please to the next matter on the list. That's the street address of 215 La Vérendrye.
Okay, I just have a question, just because I don't know, like this is the first time I ran into this. I don't like Trevor's not on the application as the authorized agent. Is there any matters that have to be cleared up before that or?
I noticed on the agenda that an application and authorization was forwarded after the
Okay,
exchange of information, and if I can just move to it, the agenda, I can let you know that there was an authorization that was received by the city, it looks like on July 10th, 2024.
Okay.
Is that correct, Ms. Arnold?
Yes,
Okay, and I think that's the case with a couple of these matters, that the authorization came in after the exchange of evidence.
they did.
Okay,
okay, no, that's fine. I just have to make sure of that stuff before we get started. So as long as we're clear on it, I'm,
I noticed that, yeah, last night when I was looking at it, so yes, that is, that's acceptable.
okay. All right, so we could get started now, we're good?
Yes, please.
Okay, so we got file number 24-1096, roll number 060-604-28000. Roll year 2025, assessed value 1,292,000, classification 20, liability taxable. We have a one building, 2-story, 1973 build with 6 suites. Going to page 2, you could see they've submitted most of the mailers. There was 1 year it didn't, and that's because the property sold in February 9, 2022 for 1,282,000. So within the reference date. And you could see they're now going down to page 3, where we have our breakdown of average monthly rent per unit of 1,251. The subject actual rents from the mailer most recent we received works out to 1,521 per unit. So you could see where our income workup comes in, 90,000 on the gross potential rents, subtract the vacancy, effective gross income, 87,758 with a 48.49 expense ratio to give the net operating income of 45,204 and a cap rate of 3.5% to bring in the market value of 1,292,000. Rent comparables here on page 4 were just to support how this property falls in line with other similar ones in the market region. So you could see here, there's one 389 Uville, it's a new build, so on comp 2 you could should probably just be disregarded. But comp 3 is another, that's a newer one. I mean, they wouldn't be identical. Those 2 and 3 were same years built, but it does give you an idea of a picture of where rents will still fall even on, I say, one that may be newer. This subject actual is 1,521 per unit. Could be because it has 4 3-bedroom units. That might be why the rents are probably a little bit higher. Going to page 5, our capitalization rate. So this page 5 will just show the multifamily where the model ranges are between the 20th and 80th percentile being 4.75 to 5.45. They obviously can range outside of that, which this one does. We typically do see that ones that are of this type of nature, the smaller ones that can bring in more buyers that are able to buy these types of properties, you'll typically see that their cap rates will be coming in a little bit lower. And that's on page 6. We've stabilized cap rate sales that have shown that, you know, even though we do have a 3.5 cap, that when you look at these sales here, you could see that 727 Sargent Avenue, 2 stories, 8 suites, 2.99% cap. So ones that are smaller, you can still get those lower cap rates from them. And now, by the way, these 6 sales are seen to just show that this supports where our model lies. So all these sales here on the cap rates would support our model cap rates, and these have all been stabilized through actual reported information to our department. If we go down here to page 8, I've provided the sales mailer that was sent out. So you could just see the owner just listing various questions here that we ask about the apartment. They didn't buy the property based on its net operating income, they tell us. Which is okay. I mean, sometimes that's maybe the case too when buying these properties is owners don't always maybe look at just the financials. They might just see it as, say, a price per door. They might just be looking at adding a smaller property to their portfolio. So there could be a myriad of reasons why they wouldn't buy it based on the income and expenses. However, I think judging by what they've submitted to us, we're quite low on the income. So even if you use 11 months and subtract vacancy and bad debt from the reported 93,434, which I have on page 12, the NOI comes in at 54,555. And our model's coming in at for just 11 months. Our model NOI is coming in at 45,204. So we're well below that, which in properties of this nature, like 9,000 difference in NOI of this reported amount has a lot of sensitivity in what's applies to the value. Even if you go up a few thousand in NOI, the value can really jump quite a bit. Just because it's already on the lower end. I've provided pictures on page 13 that you could see that I was able to pull. You know what, pretty standard place. There is basement space here, so they do get extra room. And yeah, you could see it's pretty standard. It's well kept, but not overly renovated or anything like that. But it's a well-kept building. And page 12, you could see just a picture. It almost looks like a really big house in a residential neighborhood, right? That would probably conform to what the neighborhood looks like from a residential side of things. Outside of that, yeah, just, I mean, look, we're coming at 1,292,000. The sale was 10,000 below our assessed value, which is, I would say it makes our assessment from an overall value perspective pretty good, even though it's only it is $10,000 higher. So I really don't see a need that we should be readjusting this one. I think we've done pretty good from a model perspective. So that's everything.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, have you any questions?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just regarding the cap rate there, Justin, the model driven cap rate for this property was 3.5%, I see.
Yes.
And I know it doesn't indicate it on your capitalization rate chart on page number 5 there, but the 0 to 100 percentile, the lowest cap rate in your range, is that 3.5%?
Our lowest, I don't know from a model perspective what it is. I know we have cap rate evidence that goes lower than that, so.
Well, yes, that wasn't what I was asking, though. In the chart that's shown on page 5, you have the 20th to the 80th percentile, but there's obviously a 100, 0 to 100 as well. And I think it was stated in the previous hearing that the low end in your range is 3.5%. So that would be the lowest cap that the city uses. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay. those are all of my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Knight, any questions?
No, sir.
Ms. Anderson?
None for me, thank you.
A question with respect to the cap rate, Mr. Michalak, the area, sorry, you spoke about size, specificity, size of a particular premises resulting in a lower cap rate because of increased affordability, I guess, for one of better word. So that's size specific. Is there area specific considerations as well in determination of a cap rate, or what other items might go into the generation of a cap rate by the model of 3.5%?
Neighborhood, so when you say area specific, you're talking like the area of the city that it's located?
Yes, actually.
Yeah, so that also plays a role. I know this one on La Verandra is in that St. Boniface market region area, and those are good areas for rentals as well. So that plays a role in it as well.
Was the sale, I know the capitalization rate evidence on page 6 that is stabilized and generated by your department was, I don't see 215 La Verandre, although the sale happened within the reference period. Is there a reason why that cap rate calculation wasn't included in this table?
You know what? Someone in our department, Matt, did the stabilization. Now, it could be that there wasn't enough reliance on historical information to really calculate. Like if in years past, if he's looking to stabilize a cap rate, there has to be consistent reported information for us to justify using that property to calculate the cap rate on the sale.
Okay, thank you. That's those are my questions. Mr. Smith, your presentation, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So 215 La Verandre, as the city has indicated, there was a valid sale of the property in February of 2022 for $1,282,000. And if you look at the city's evidence with regard to the sale mailer, you can see that the property was not purchased based on income and expense data. So there was no reliance on what the income and expense for the property would be by the purchaser in their acquisition at that time frame. Is there anything else I was going to point out there? No, that was it with regard to the sale mailer. So there is that background with regard to the subject sale. Looking at my page number 3, on the chart at the top, you can see that the previous assessment was for the last cycle was $895,000. And the 2025 assessment is $1,292,000. This is a 44.4% increase. Certainly that's above market norms with regard to an average increase in assessment over that time frame. The remainder of the information on that page just gives you a brief outline of the property. Total of 6 units, 4 of them being 3-bedroom units and 2 of them being 2-bedroom units. As mentioned already, the property is maintained but not renovated. If you look at my photos of the property beginning on page 4, you can see some exteriors of it. Fairly typical building of this type. 2-story with basement. The only renovations, and this is not in all suites, and it's not a renovation so much as a replacement, is some of the flooring was worn to such an extent that some new New flooring was put in, as you can see in page number 5 there. Again, that's not all of the units. The kitchens are dominantly original, as you can see on page number 6, with the countertops and the cabinetry. Obviously, ranges and fridges get replaced as needed, and then we have the remainder of the photos there. Moving on, property is in St. Boniface, as indicated. You can see the site on page number 9. There is parking at the rear of the property. The location is in that North St. Boniface area, as shown on page number 10. On that, we can move into valuation itself. And for this property, we only had 11 months of data from the 2022 year, as shown on the income and expense attached to the brief. This gives us a total of $97,721. Bear with me for just a moment here. There's actually $89,578 for the 11 months. Extrapolating that out to 12 months gives us the $97,721 based on the rents that were being charged. Overall average rental rate is $1,357 based on that detail. We provide you with the CMHC data at the bottom there. 3 bedrooms are somewhat unusual, so the stats tend to be a little off on those particular numbers. We have gone with the in-place income extrapolated to 12 months at $97,721. The property has no parking or laundry revenue, so that's it's not been added on, as there is none. Vacancy. Subject property had actually significant vacancy in that 2022 year. If you look at the income and expense form, vacancy was listed as $6,729, bad debt of $2,865, totaling $9,594. This is well above the norm in terms of typical vacancy. It's 10.7%. St. Boniface had a vacancy rate of 6% for 3+ bedroom units, with City of Winnipeg having an overall vacancy rate of 3% for 3+ bedroom units. We've used 3.5% in our projection for the subject property. We had a single year to go off with regard to expenses, so we've utilized that information, extrapolated it out to 12 years, giving us $31,950 in expenses. That's not stabilized, as we only had a single year to operate on. Moving into capitalization rates, we have 2 aspects as always. We have direct market data, as shown on page number 16. These are actual transactions in the marketplace and the cap rates that the property sold for. These were properties purchased for their in-place income and not purchased for renovation and reposition within the market. So we have a range. These are all within that 2021, 2022 timeframe, and they range between a low of 4.5% up to a high of 6.5% for a property on Tebow in Norwood, St. Boniface. Typically, we're looking at 5%, 5.5%, 5.6. There's some that are under, obviously 4.9, 4.5, 4.6, but majority of the sales that we're seeing range from 5% upwards. Number of suites, as you can see, they vary from a low of 7 units up to a high of 18 units on Cromwell, again, in St. Boniface, cap rate of 5.8% there. Moving on quickly, we look at the main commercial brokerages and their stated cap rate reports, provided information from Colliers and Cushman Wakefield. So when we look at Colliers, I looked at kind of a history of the last 3 cycles, essentially 2018, 2020, and 2023 cap rate surveys. And essentially, we're seeing stability. If you look at 2018, you can see the low rises are showing 5 to 6%. 2020, low rise 5 to 6%, and 2023 low rise 5 to 6%. Now, Colliers does a very significant amount of the investment sale transactions in the city of Winnipeg, and they have good data behind their cap rate report. When we look at that time frame, we also have to look at the interest rate environment, and if we look at that particular issue, we see that interest rates were rising in that period, certainly at Q1 of 2023. And the impact of that obviously is that as interest rates rise, typically we see an impact on the cap rates that are paid for investment properties as well, as they will rise in tandem with it. Moving on, page 18, Cushman and Wakefield data. This is their Q1 2023 cap rate survey. And when we look at multi-residential cap rates, as stated by Cushman, we have 5% on the low end to 5.75% on the high end with regards to capitalization rates. Now, that's a fairly consistent message across the board from both the market data as well as industry participants. Subject property is not renovated. It's not in new condition. It has a significant number of 3-bedroom units, 4 out of the 6 being 3-bedroom units, which tend to have somewhat higher vacancy. All of these things do have an impact on what a purchaser would be willing to pay. As mentioned, the acquisition price for the property was not based on knowledge of the income and expense for the subject property. And that should be kept in mind in reviewing that particular sale. So when we look at the subject property, it is 6 units. It is in St. Boniface. Relatively well located, certainly. So we put it at the low end of the cap rate range at 5% in applying that in our valuation model. This is summed up on page number 19. We have the rental income projected for 12 years, applying the cap, or rather the vacancy rate of 3.5%, gives us $3,420 in vacancy allowance. The actual for that year was $9,594 in total. Expense allowance is certainly very much on the low end at just under $32,000. Again, that's a single year, so we don't know what the variation in that is. Typically, it would be somewhat higher than that. We get our NOI, to which we apply the 5%. Giving us a final market value of $1,247,000. The addendum materials just include the income and expense information for the property from that 2022 year. And that is my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McLeod. Questions?
Yeah, just so on page 16 regarding cap rate, you don't have any addresses associated with these properties?
I do have addresses associated with them. Typically, we don't like to publish them for reasons of confidentiality, but I do have that information here today, yes.
Okay, so for reasons of confidentiality, did these all transact through land titles?
These were all properties that were on the open market and sold according to the definitions of fair market value. I can't go back and tell you that each one went through land titles, but I would think that the majority of them would have, yes.
And regarding these properties, did you run a stabilization yourself, or was it pulled from agent listed income and expenses?
These were based on the actuals from the properties themselves.
Okay, so you did stabilizations on them?
A stabilization was done, I believe, yes.
Okay. And then I guess, so my question is, like, at the end of the day, the value sold for 1.282 million. You think the market value then by the reference date would have gone down? That you're requesting
Well,
247,000?
That's how you're framing it, Justin. And as I mentioned, the property was not purchased based on the income and expense for the property. So that purchase price is open to whether it was an appropriate value at the time or not. And when I look at the actual data from the property and apply reasonable, in some cases more than reasonable parameters such as the vacancy and the expense allowance there at 33%, I don't think that the valuation that we've placed on it is unreasonable. So I'm not saying it has gone down. I'm saying we need to look at the purchase price with an open mind as far as that value.
Those are all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Knight, questions?
Just back to that purchase price. If that purchase price was the value a year before this, what changed in that year to create this value to go down? And I don't want to hear about that, he paid too much or whatever. What would have made the difference?
Well, if you don't want to hear that he paid too much, then there's probably not a lot that I can tell you other than he made his decision without having the detail of the income and expense. And when you look at the actual income and expense and apply, as I said, very reasonable valuation parameters, and I would point particularly to looking at the expense ratio on it of 33% being very much on the low end. I think the value proposed is certainly fair and not unreasonable. So I'm not saying that it's gone down. I'm saying that purchase price needs to be looked at in the frame of reference that it was purchased under.
So the city's giving a lower operating income, but the cap rate is what's creating the problem, correct?
Well, with regard to the city's valuation, yes, 3.5% is the absolute low end of what one would see potentially out in the marketplace, and those are very unusual circumstances.
But because they've lowered the net operating income, that 3.5% does make sense. Like, it's just hard to figure out what's the right net operating income.
Well, when we
Am I able to speak to anything? Just like I can, because she's asking about.
Yeah, I kind of asking both of you.
At this point, Mr. Michalak, perhaps we'll just have Mr. Smith. You will have an opportunity to summarize at the end should you wish, but at this point, let's stay with the procedures set out.
So when we look at, and I'll direct you to my page number 19. So again, we had 11 months of operation to base the valuation on for 2022. When we look at that data from the income and expense information, the rental income is somewhat higher. vacancy rate for the actual property was $9,594 versus the 3420 that I'm projecting at 3.5% based on market vacancy data from CMHC for properties of this type. So $6,000 gap there essentially brings you in line with the effective gross from the city, if you look at it in that way, and then the actual expense allowance at just under 32,000 versus 42,000 for the city. Again, we're 10,000 under, so it gives you a net operating income that is quite high. I would suggest expense allowance of 32,000, or rather the 33.8% is very much on the low end. So the NOI, I mean, we're trying to project it as reasonably as we can. I have no other basis of changing that expense allowance. I would suggest it should be higher. But I understand, I certainly understand the issue in projecting a fair NOI, but we try to be as fair as possible on the number that we presented there.
Okay, thank you.
3.5% cap is simply not something that
Right,
we see almost ever in the marketplace.
okay, thank you.
Ms. Anderson, questions?
I have no questions, thank you.
I have some questions just for clarification purposes. The table at page 16, the 8 properties that you have listed.
Yes.
You did not prepare that table, did you? You've taken that and cut and pasted it?
No, I prepared the table.
You did the stabilization and prepared all of the those cap rates?
No, I personally did not go through and develop each of the cap rates. I worked in tandem with another provider and was able to confirm the data in the material that we're looking at.
Okay, and there are no 6-suite. Simcoe is the smallest one at number 8, right?
Simcoe is the smallest at number 8. Yes.
Right.
In terms of the area, Highfield, Cromwell, and Tebow and Thomas Berry are in that same St. Boniface Norwood area.
So not having done the stabilization, are you in a position to comment on whether these were underpriced or overpriced? And I'm asking that from the perspective of your position that the price on La Vérendrye, the sale price on La Vérendrye, was not based on NOI or rental amounts.
So, as I had mentioned, I was able to work in tandem with other market providers and looking at the detail behind these particular sales. So whether I did the stabilization or not, the information has been confirmed, and the cap rates paid were paid based on the income expense for those properties, not as potential renovation projects. So I can't comment as to whether I feel each of those was over or undervalued in what they paid for it, getting back to your original question.
Right.
But it has been confirmed, the data behind what we're looking at.
I hope.
As I said, I worked in tandem with other market participants. And across the board, don't select me as a sole person here.
I'm only asking you because you're here.
Nobody has access to all of the sales that occur in the marketplace, including the city of Winnipeg. And so you need to work with others in the marketplace to determine capitalization rates based on information that is available to others, and confirm it with them as to what the data involved was. It's a very common practice.
That's fine. And I'm gonna two last questions, same questions I asked of Mr. Michalak. Size specificity or the size can affect the cap rate
It certainly can.
as can the neighborhood. Would you
As
agree with that as well?
can, yes.
Okay, thank you. I don't have anything further. Mr. Michalak, an opportunity to summarize.
So I'll just speak to, this property has never been appealed historically when I've seen our records, so. The report, that's another factor in where our income number comes from. Had this property probably been reviewed on a regular basis with appeals, we probably would have adjusted this income and it would have gone up, and then thus the cap rate probably would have gone up as well. Because I don't see where this property still would have fell out of the range of close to its sale price. So I just think from a overall perspective, like we are about getting one number, and that's our assessed value of 1.292. The property sold for 1.282. That shows you how close we are still at providing a final value. So I mean, I'd be able to reduce it to the sale price. I don't see why it should be lower than the sale price. And that's all I'll say.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, summary?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll conclude that matter. No more-
Could I just step out quickly to the washroom?
I was just about to say, why don't we take 5 minutes? We're about halfway through the docket, so it's 10:28 now. Why don't we all be back here or be ready to go by 10:35, 7 minutes?
Okay,
Okay, is that enough time?
yeah, perfect.
Ms. Anderson, Ms. Knight? Great, thank you. We can take a short recess, please. Thank you. I'd like to call this meeting back to order, please, and return to the next matter on the docket. That being item number 5, street address 160 Johnson Avenue West. Mr. Michalak, can you begin your presentation, please?
So we have file number 24-1090, roll number 140-829-87100, roll year 2025, assessed value 2,080,000, classification 20, liability T. We have a 1 building, 2-story apartment built in 1960. 16 suites involved. You can see there's no recent history of sales here on page 2. Last sale was in 2013. We have on page 3, the income value summary, which would show the 16 units, and we have an average monthly rent of $932.26. The subject actuals are $928.18. So we're $4 apart per unit on the rents. So that gives us the gross potential rent $178,994, vacancy 2.6%, effective gross income $174,340, expense ratio 45.12%. Coming up with a net operating income of $95,678 and a capitalization rate of 4.6%. That comes up with the estimated value of $2,080,000. Page 4, I have provided the rent comparables here of other similar properties in the neighborhood, so you can see where it falls in line with other properties, and then I mean, we're within $4 of the actuals. So I would think our income lines up pretty good from a mass appraisal perspective there. Capitalization rates, again, touched on previously on page 5, where the cap rate lies between 4.7 and 5.45 on the 20th to 80th percentiles, and then page 6 supporting our cap rates driven by the model with actual sales that were stabilized. Now, we could see here if we go to page 8, I provided the income and expense mailers for the property here. So you could see in 2022 they have net operating incomes 99,283. And 2021 net operating income 101,702. So you could see those past couple years that where that falls in, and then our models at 95,678. So really close with the net operating income, pretty much bang on. And yeah, that about would conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, questions for Mr. Michalak?
Yes, just the one. So again, regarding capitalization rate, the model is used 4.6% for the subject,
That's correct.
and that is taking into account area.
It is taking into account area, yes.
Okay, and that would be under the 20th percentile of 4.75%.
It is lower than the 20th percentile.
Okay, those are my only questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Knight, questions?
No, sir.
Ms. Anderson?
And none for me, thank you.
I have a question with respect to the cap rate. Are you aware of anything with this property that would bring it below the 20th percentile in cap rate?
I am not aware of why that would be the case. I did initially, when I looked into this property, when I seen it first pop up, I did kind of raise my eyebrow, but then once we provided the actual stabilized cap rates on page 6, I was comfortable with where we were with it. So that's why I didn't request any adjustment.
And have you inspected this property, or has it been recently inspected?
It has not.
Okay, thank you. I don't have anything further. Mr. Smith, your evidence, please.
Yes, thank you. So just point of clarification, I guess. The city has stated subject actual rents are $928.18 on their page 3. Using the actuals, the average is $903 per month for the units. So there is a gulf there between what the city is indicating versus the actuals on the rental side. So just moving forward into the property itself. So this property is located in Elmwood, right in Elmwood. It is immediately adjacent to the back lane quarter block off of Henderson Highway at the juncture of Johnson and Henderson. You can see this on my page 10 and page 11 for the location. The area itself is economically disadvantaged. If you drive the area, you certainly see evidence of that. Falls under the neighborhood renewal program for the government of Manitoba. And the communities selected for that are selected due to higher than average incidences of crime, poverty, core housing need, lack of opportunities for employment, training, and or recreation engagement, etc. Previously, it had been included in the core area initiative. So why I'm pointing this out is this obviously speaks to the area that the property is located in. It speaks to the attractiveness of the area and the attractiveness of having an investment in real estate in that particular area as well. Looking at, let's jump back to my page number 3. See some history of the property here. We still have one outstanding 2018 assessment at the municipal board. It was reduced, but not where it should be. You can see the prior years, 2023 being reduced to 1.6 million. And from 1,939,000, and now we have an assessment of $2,080,000. Property was sold in 2013 for $1,065,000. Subsequently, they did renovate it at that time in 2013 and early 2014. So our renovations are as of today's date, are going on being 10 years old, 8 years as of the valuation date. Property was originally built in 1960, and we have a total of 16 units. 6 of those being bachelor, 5 of them being 1-bedroom units, and 2 of them, or rather 5 of them being 2-bedroom units, giving us the total of 16. So it's a relatively high number of bachelor units in a complex, a little over a third there. Photos of the property begin on page 4. You can see the basic structure, fairly straightforward, and you can see the renovations that were done to it in the time. These photos are somewhat older, so I have not seen it in the last couple of years, so it may look shinier in the photos than it currently is, but I couldn't say for sure. Further description on page number 9, again, just with regard to what was renovated at the time. So it was renovated and did see the rental rates increase back in 2014. Let's move into the valuation. The actual gross revenue for year-end 2020 based on full occupancy was $173,306 based on the actual rents charged. Now that's at full occupancy. The potential rent indicated in the income and expense questionnaire is $178,812. Now I'll explain that. This doesn't take into account the actual discounted rental rates applied to the property. So the property manager for this property, and indeed all of our properties here today, diligently applies for the maximum potential increase each year for the properties that they manage. They typically get that increase that obviously stacks up, and you end up with the potential to charge $178,000. Now, the market in that area and for that building will not support those rental rates, so they don't charge those rental rates. They charge what the value will bear, and at full occupancy, again, that's $173,306. So that is what's contained in the income and expense information provided. So hopefully that's clear. Happy to answer any questions on that when the time comes. Potential rents before discounting are shown as $924 for 1-bedroom and $1,090 for 2-bedroom and $796 for the bachelors. Those are not the rents that are charged. CMHC data is shown at the bottom of that page, and we can skip forward to page number 14. Obviously, we're going with full occupancy number 173,306 and including both parking and laundry revenue for 2022 in our calculations. Estimated expenses begin on page 15. CMHC stats. We've gone with the 2.6% that the city has used as being reasonable, supported by the CMHC market vacancy data. And the actual expenses are shown on page number 16. So we do have 3 years of history here. We have gone through the process of stabilization, giving us our budgeted number of $81,072 on a stabilized basis. Now, if you look at the previous years, you can see 2020, 74,136, 2021, 74,884, 2022, 86,174. So you do have variation, obviously, between the years. We've gone through the stabilization process, indicated it on the right-hand side, how it's been done, and applied that 81,000 in our valuation. Capitalization rate. All of the same information we've already discussed is on my pages 17, 18, and 19. Looking at the subject property and the location and demand for properties in that area, looking at rents that you're able to charge, as evidenced by the subject property not being able to charge the maximum rents that they're allowed to under the RTB system of 178,000. All of these things point to the area being challenged and in investors' eyes being of a lower quality than other areas in terms of investment potential. So looking at the subject property, we have applied a capitalization rate of 5.5%. If you review again the Collier's information, Cushman and Wakefield's information, they're pointing to low-rise properties being between 5 and 6%, and 5 and 5.75%. Our own data indicates very similar range, with some on either side of that, obviously. The 5.5% for the subject property is certainly a fair estimate of what an investor would pay for that property. So looking at page number 20, we summarize our valuation. 5.5% against the NOI gives us a final market value of $1,666,000. Again, this is higher than what the Board of Revision decided in the 2020 in the last cycle, as well as higher than our valuation from the last cycle as well. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Mr. Michalak, questions?
Yeah, okay, so income were like 0.5% apart, so I mean, I don't think I really have to touch on anything there. Regarding just the comments, I guess, made on the investment potential, the area, etc. Does this property have problems with demand in terms of vacancy issues, or is it pretty close to occupied?
It varies. The reason looking at the year in question and the vacancy allowance there, if they were to charge the higher rental level that they're allowed to charge under RTB, having applied for it, their vacancy would be significantly higher than it is now, as there's other similar accommodation for lower rent in the area that would draw the tenants off to other locations.
Okay, with that being said, though, the property has a pretty consistent income stream, though, is that correct? With it being like not really issues with people wanting to rent there, people still will rent it, the income's consistent. Would you agree with that?
I would agree that the income is consistent at the level that we're projecting it at, yes.
Okay.
It is relatively stable in that at that level.
And then just regarding things like just expenses in general, and this goes back to when we get a lot of comments that properties in areas that experience extra crime, etc., that kind of thing. The expense allowance is still below 50%. So I just again have a question. are those factors really playing into detracting against this property?
Oh, absolutely. So, I'll speak to that. They've had, a lot of vandalism occur. I actually handle commercial property, immediately adjacent to this, and they have, continual vandalism and, attempted break-ins and things of that nature. You drive down, Johnson there and look at, the level of other properties, it is deteriorating, I guess, is how I would put it. Bit of background on this property, so bought in that 2013 timeframe and reinvested in at that timeframe. I will say that, and this is directly from the owner themselves, they somewhat regret having not purchased the property, but the amount of money that they invested in doing the renovations for the property. It hasn't necessarily worked out as they would have anticipated.
Okay, so they're making 91,640 for an income, but it hasn't worked out. I'm just a little confused by the statements because the income just seems consistent. And the bank, like, it just
Well,
doesn't.
it is consistent, so they are, and I have to answer the questions in the way you're posing them. So is the income consistent? Yes, it's somewhat consistent. But it's consistent at the level that we're projecting, not the level that the city is projecting. The 178,000 that the city is projecting in rent for the subject is not an achievable level for the property. They simply can't get that on the marketplace. People won't locate there for that amount. It's been proven. I don't know that there's a lot more to say there other than the expenses. The expenses are what they are. They do tend to be higher in areas that are economically disadvantaged for obvious reasons. So whether the income is stable or not doesn't, the income is not what the purchaser of the property anticipated it might become over time, having invested into the property in renovations. So that is what I'm trying to get across to the panel.
Okay, yeah, and then so that I guess would lead me to the application of the capitalization rate. So page 17, again, similar questions regarding the last property, regarding the same cap rates that have been provided, no addresses. And
We have the addresses as stated, and I'm happy to discuss if we need to do so. There's no lack of addresses here. I've stated why they're not there.
And I mean, we provide that transparency. So I just when I'm presented with this chart, it would be nice to actually see addresses so that sales could be reviewed on our end. And then because I don't know what, like, how to work with this. So my questions from the last one have carried over to this, where I don't really see how the cap rates are applied in them, like these cap rates, and then it's applied to this property using this data. So that's I guess my questions carried over.
Sure, that was a question and a statement.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Lynn. Rather than just saying your questions from the last carry over, can you ask a summary question, Mr. Mikulik?
Okay. So were any of these cap rates fully stabilized on page 17?
So we've covered this information already, but I'll be brief about it. Each of the capitalization rates, the data behind it, income and expense for the property was reviewed in determining the overall capitalization rate established, and in I believe in all or nearly all circumstances, there was multiple years available to do that stabilization for the property.
Have these properties transacted through land titles or are any of them share transfers?
Again, we've already covered that information as well, and I believe the majority of them have gone through land titles, but there may be some that are share transfers.
Okay, those are all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson, have you any questions?
I have no questions, thank you.
Ms. Knight?
I just have one. Is this property right behind, is this like Henderson Highway, then the lane, then this property?
That's correct.
Okay,
It's right on the laneway.
so you're
Like
saying
some-
that the bike stores are right there, and you're saying that this property has had lots of problems with theft?
They have ongoing issue with vandalism and damage and theft in the area and for those properties, yes. With cars.
Isn't that more within the cars rather than into the building?
Well, so let's be clear here. The car parked in the parking lot of the apartment building is the tenant's car. So if they're parking there and their car is, broken into or frequently broken into, or there's a history of it, they're going to be less inclined to stay there. They'll be less inclined to recommend others to locate there, et cetera.
And how many of those tenants actually have cars?
There are a total of, I
I
believe,
know there's,
6 stalls. 7 stalls. I think I had mentioned it in my description, but I can't recall the total number that. Let me just see. We have a total of 8 parking stalls.
and do all the tenants have vehicles?
I couldn't.
Yeah, you don't know that, right? Okay,
Vehicles.
all right, thank you.
Thank you. I have a question with respect to the cap rates that appear in your chart on page 17, Mr. Smith. The cap rates range is set there between 4.5 and 6.5% roughly. The cap rates can be neighborhood specific, as we've discussed before, or they can increase or decrease depending on the quality of the neighborhood. Is that fair to say?
Neighborhood is certainly one factor that goes into what ultimate cap rate is paid for a property. Yes.
Right, as does the size of the
Size, condition of the units, age of the property, or any number of.
now these on page 17 in the chart of 17, these sales or the cap rate calculations cover a fairly wide area in Winnipeg. The ones that might be closest to a similar area would include Thomas Berry Street. That'd be more of a core area or a.
No, Thomas Berry is in St. Boniface, as is Highfield and Cromwell Thibault. So you'd be looking at more of a Simcoe McRae in terms of somewhat similar areas.
And follow up with something you said, the condition, is there a condition report with respect to these 8 cap rate calculation sales?
Yes, so we had 5 of them having been upgraded and renovated to various degrees, and 3 of them having been simply maintained over time without renovation.
And this property would fall in the upgraded, the renovated area, the subject property 160 Johnson Avenue West.
Yes, upgraded in 2014, yes.
Thank you. I don't have anything further. Mr. McCulloch, any summary?
No summary, thanks.
Mr. Smith?
No, thank you.
I'm going to conclude this matter with one comment, and we talked about it a little bit here. I didn't interrupt when the discussion was taking place. Evidence of other board decisions are largely irrelevant. We're going to operate on the evidence that we hear today with respect to comparables, evidence of what a Board of Revision has done in previous matter is not going to be given any weight. Just for informational purposes.
For informational purposes, I provided for information background on the subject.
We can turn to the next matter now, please. That's at 380 Edison here in the city, Mr. McCulloch. Would you lead us through your evidence, please?
Yep. Okay, so we have file number 241089, roll number 040003355500, roll year 2025, assessed value 2,394,000. Residential or classification is 20, liability T. We have a 2-story, one building built in 1963 with 16 suites. You could see on page 2, the property did sell April 4th, 2024. And
So no, that's post-reference
Okay.
information, and we're not going to be considering it.
I'm not considering it. I'm just saying because there was no mailer information for us in the years past. I know I had listed that. And I would normally be a situation where we'd be going for non-compliance, but in this case, we're not because of the sale.
I see. Okay, thank you. We won't
So
be using
that's-
the post-reference information as evaluation consideration.
It was originally coming up that we were, but I just didn't want to get questions from the panel members saying like, oh, well, you have that there was no income statements. Why is this one not non-compliance like we were previously discussing earlier? And I just want to make that clear that that's why we're not going that direction.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anyway, so we're going to page 3. We'll just go over here where the income comes from. The average monthly rent we have is $1,091.14 per unit. Gross potential rent you could see at $209,499 with the vacancy 2.6%. Effective gross income $204,052. Expense ratio 44.85%, and a net operating income of $112,535. With the capitalization rate of 4.7% to get our value of $2,394,000. Similar to previous, just the rental comparables to show where the property would fall in line with other subjects in the neighborhood to validate our rents. Now, capitalization rates, I know were discussed. So again, multifamily, we were between 4.75 and 5.45% on the 20th to 80th percentile. And then we have on page 6 where we have the capitalization rate evidence that would support the model driven cap rate being applied today. Now, if we go to page 8, I just have the 2020 income statement here, which the net operating income works out to $112,468. So seeing that we are relatively close here compared to the model from the 2020 income statement, our model is 112,535, which the income statement's 112,468. So again, and that's from 2020, so relatively close there. And then you could just see some pictures here on page 10 that I was able to get where suites have been, it looks like they've been updated. And you could see there that there's been windows, bathroom, this picture of the kitchen area. So it's had decent updates. And Yeah, I think that would be everything. So we don't feel that there needs to be further adjustments to the value on this property. Feel comfortable where it's at. So that would conclude my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Michalak. Mr. Smith, questions?
Yes, questions. So first question would be with regard to the non-compliance potential issue and questions from the board. Could that not have been simply addressed verbally?
I don't know what you mean.
You're indicating that the panel members may have questioned you as to why non-compliance was not sought for this property when income expense was not provided for the relevant year, and that's why you included the post-reference sale data. Could that not just have been done verbally?
I don't, honestly, I don't know. This was just generated with the brief, so I don't know what you're.
Well, my other point, and it's significantly prejudicial to include this information. If you were to include that there was a sale post-reference in April of 2024, should the considerations, foreign value and sale price have not been blacked out or struck out in some other way so that panel members are not exposed to post-reference information?
Maybe, I really
Is
don't.
that not the standard city methodology?
I don't know what methodology you're referring
I
to.
can assure you this is not something that will be factored in, will not be considered or won't form a basis or even a factor in any of the decision that we come to, Mr. Smith.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Have you inspected this particular property yourself?
No.
All right, those are all of my questions. Thank you.
Ms. Knight, have you any questions?
I do not, thank you.
Ms. Anderson?
I do not, thank you.
Mr. Michalak, again, with respect to the cap rate, or with respect to the cap rate, are you aware of anything with this property that would bring it below the 20th percentile? And I recognize we're quite close to the 20th percentile here, but are you aware of anything that would bring us below the 20th percentile in the cap rate calculation?
I would just say that it's in a fairly solid neighborhood for renting this one, and again, it is supported by evidence that we've provided on page 6, so I would think that's why you would be on the lower end of the cap rate analysis.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any further questions. Mr. Smith, your brief, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So, looking at my page number 3, the 2023 assessment for the property was $1,990,000. We now have a jump to $2,394,000 for the reference here. Subject property was built in 1963. We have a total of 16 units, a range of 1 and 2 bedrooms, 7 1-beds, and 9 2-bedroom units. So this property is located on Edison. If you take a look at my page number 10, you can see the location of the property in East Kildona. Site is shown on page number 9. Now, Edison, and in particular, this section of Edison is dominantly multifamily apartment blocks. It's a very heavily competitive marketplace for tenancies in this area, and accordingly, the property owner and their property manager have had to be very aggressive in the rental rates that they offer, the discounts that they provide, other amenities that are given to potential tenants. in order to draw the tenants to their building versus the many other buildings that are located in the immediate vicinity of the subject property. So it's a very competitive marketplace, and that does have an impact on the overall operation of the subject property. Looking at photos of the property, obviously they weren't taken this summer, as you can see on page number 4. That is our exterior, the concrete block interior hallways, and then we get into the units themselves as shown on page number 6 and 7. Fairly straightforward. Interiors are generally in standard good condition for property of this age, commensurate with the age of the improvements. Site is shown on page number 9, and you can see the parking at the rear of the building site. We move on to the owner evaluation itself on page number 12. And the actual gross rental revenue for subject property for year-end 2022 was $200,303 as bear with me for just a moment while I confirm that particular figure. Total income. Yeah, that appears to be slightly off. We'll compare that with the summary on page number 19. So I marginally overstated the actual revenue at 100% occupancy. 100% occupancy would be $196,053 as shown on the income and expense statement, and that's at full occupancy. The actual amount that they are allowed to charge under RTB is $201,540. Obviously, they're unable to charge those particular rental rates, and so they charge what the market bears, which is the $196,000. For our purposes, I'm not going to adjust my valuation at this point in time. We'll move forward as it is. The vacancy for the subject property, pardon me, bear with me for just a moment. Page number 12, we're looking at rental rates. So I provide the CMHC market rental report with regard to rental rates for the unit types in the area, and what they're achieving there is indicative of what they're able to achieve on the marketplace. So we are using the $200,303, again, marginally higher than the $196,000 that they're able to achieve at 100% occupancy. To this, we add the parking income as well as laundry revenue. Moving on to expenses, CMHC vacancy stats on page 14. We referred to the 2.6% that the city of Winnipeg is using. The actual vacancy for the subject property was in this case in line with the 2.6%. Moving on to the expenses themselves, we provided a 3-year history of the property as well as our stabilization of those expenses. So once the property expenses are stabilized, we come to expense allowance of $104,342. Now, I'll run you through this quickly, so that you're aware of what we've done. Where it makes sense, we have gone with 3-year averages where there's no dominant trend with that particular expense category. We've made adjustments where appropriate, where there's standout features such as insurance. As already stated in this hearing earlier, insurance is going up considerably, essentially every year. So we've gone with the actual for insurance. My property management amount has actually been stabilized at 5% of effective gross income, not a 3-year average. That just hadn't been changed in the notes. Professional fees, office supplies, marketing, etc. There's no dominant trend there, so we have 3-year average. Only 2 years of hydro were available for some reason, so we have a 2-year average. Water, as you can see, 3-year average. HVAC, etc. The repair and maintenance for the property, we have a range of 7,000 going up to just under 10,000 for the property. This is significantly low and below market norms. Typically, we would see 1,200 to 1,500 per unit. We've applied a very low end 1,000 per unit for repair and maintenance in our estimate for the stabilization. Essentially, they've been underspending on repair and maintenance. Wages and benefits, maintenance supplies, all 3-year averages. And finally, we have property tax there. So our 104,000 is based on, again, standard stabilization of the expenses. Capitalization rate, all the same information is present for you here. We have a property built in 1963, total of 16 units. It has had some updating, obviously, over time, but is in reasonable condition. What we're seeing in properties that have been upgraded is that the capitalization rates paid for those typically tend to be slightly on the higher side. And the market that this particular property is in, if you drive down Edison and look at the very large number of competitive buildings that this property is among, you can see that there is and the impact that has on rental rates and discounts applied, etc. The attractiveness of this particular property is impacted by all of those features. So we've used a cap rate of 5.5% in our evaluation. And this gives us our final market value of $1,735,000. And that is my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Michaluk. Have you questions?
Just on page 15 with the stabilized expenses that you ran, I don't see anything provided in any addenda with regarding the actual slips. Is there a reason for that?
With regard to
like page 15, you stabilized, but I don't see the actual in the addenda, like the provided information. I'm just curious, is there a reason for that?
No, that's an oversight, and I do apologize for that. The data in the income stabilization was taken directly from property management.
Okay, so they didn't provide you with the actuals to put in the brief? Like the actual slips?
They did provide me with those, but we mistakenly forgot to include it in the addenda materials.
Okay, because just for me being able to verify, that's all.
Right.
Okay, and then I guess we'll go into capitalization rate here and the application of it. These sales have they all transacted through land titles?
Mr. Chair, do we need to do this?
We do have to, if it's going to form part of the record, each
Each and every
item
one
is separate, we can summarize. But as each of the hearings is separate and can be discreetly monitored, that's for evidentiary reasons, they should be addressed. They can be addressed in less detail, but they should be addressed.
Sure. So each of the property sales indicated has been verified. And I can't state categorically that each and every one of them went through land titles, but certainly the majority of them do. There may be a share sale in there.
And did you run full stabilizations on all these properties?
As indicated, I confirmed the information with regard to the development of the cap rate with various market participants, so that we were able to review the data that was developed. I can't state that each and every one had full background with it being able to do a 3 or a 5 year history on it.
Those are all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson, questions?
No, thank you, not at this time.
Ms. Knight?
Just one comment you made about Edison Avenue. You said something about the buildings on the street or something. What did you say? I can't remember.
I said it's a highly competitive neighborhood with a very significant number of multifamily buildings and a concentration around this particular property.
Okay, so in that, where that property is, are some of those buildings come down? Did they come down in that year, 2023, or no?
I'm not sure that I understand your question.
So did they take some of those buildings down in 2023 or homes or something in that area?
Did they take the buildings, like demolish
Yes,
in 2023?
yes.
I could not
Okay,
answer that question, I'm afraid.
all right. I know now what's happening on that street, and I just didn't know when it all started. That's what I was trying to find out. And that would be in that block. Yeah, okay. All right,
Well-
thank you. It's okay.
I have a couple of questions. When were the improvements done to these suites?
Mhm.
To my knowledge, it hasn't been like a wholesale, there hasn't been a wholesale redo of the property. They have done them over time, which that was what was indicated to me by property management.
Okay.
When we reviewed it.
And this area in Edison is further north than the East Elmwood area we were discussing.
Oh, yes, very
last.
much.
So it's not as high a crime area, or it's not
No.
what we would classify core area initiative and availability. Thank you. I don't have anything further. Mr. McCullough, summary?
No summary, thank you.
Mr. Smith?
No, thank you.
Then we'll turn to the last matter on our docket today, please. That being, I'm sorry, the street address of 1035 Monroe. Chance to turn to it, and then we can begin, please. Mr. McCullough, with your brief.
Yep. Okay. So we have file number 241092, roll number 02060899000, roll year 2025, assessed value 3,245,000. Classification 20, liability is taxable T. We have one building, 2 stories, year built 1971 with 29 suites. You could see as we go down to page 3, where I'll take you to the income value summary here. We have out of the 29 units, 17 1-bedroom, 12 2-bedroom, 992.63 per unit with our model rents. So that gives a gross potential rent of 345,435, less the 2.6% vacancy. Effective gross income is 336,454. With an expense ratio of 51.77%, gives us a net operating income of 162,272 and a capitalization rate of 5% to get the final value of 3,245,000. Page 4, we have rental comparables again of other similar properties in the neighborhood. So you could see here where the rents would fall, and I do have, there's a couple of them here on Monroe Avenue. You could see with similar unit mixes there with comp 2 and comp 4. We're at 992.63 per unit on the model, and I mean, we're right in line with what's typical. So I don't see an issue there with how the rents are being applied from an income perspective. As we shift towards the cap rate, again, we've touched on the model between 4.75 and 5.45 in the 20th to 80th percentiles. And then to back up our model cap rate for this property, we provided on page 6 the various sales that have transacted to get our cap rate being backed up by these stabilizations. Now, we go to page 8. So we have the income and expenses. So you could see here, net operating income 2022, 147,247. 2021 income statement, net operating income 183,702. So there's about a $40,000 gap that from 2021 to 2022. Our model's coming in at 162,000, and I mean, I think we're reasonable, as we're kind of right in the middle there of those 2 years. So I don't see an issue there from an overall NOI perspective. Now, when we look here, just page 13 and onwards, I just provided some pictures of the property. And so you could see nothing fancy, basic, but maintained. So no real crazy renovations, but the owner obviously maintains the building. And yeah, I think that's pretty much everything we got here. Again, from the income side of things, the gross rents here from, if you look on page 10, the 2022 income statement, the gross rents are 363,780. We're at 345, 435. So like I said, we're right in the middle of the 2 years on net operating income, 5% cap rate. I don't see any need that this one should be reduced further. That's all for my presentation today.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, questions?
Yes, I'll keep it to a minimum. So on page number 11, Dustin, you've got the 2021 income and expenses there. And the stated residential rental amount was $349,705, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if we flip back to a year later on page number 8, the 2022 year end, the residential revenue is 336,634, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So we're seeing a declining rent for the property, correct?
I I don't know, like, did they lower their rents or is this a product of vacancy?
That's not I'll get into that in my presentation.
And so just to expand on your question to answer, that's again something we look at when we see a drop like that from one year to the next, especially going forward. We kind of wonder, well, is it because there's renovations happening in there? Like, there's not enough for us to be able to go off of, to be able to say like, well, yeah, they've had to just reduce their rents, you know, so again, that's where I felt that our income was okay when you look at it over the 2-year period.
All right, those are all of my questions. Thank you.
Ms. Knight, questions?
No, sir.
Ms. Anderson?
No, thank you.
Mr. Michalak, there was some discussion and questions about the gross rent amounts and some comparisons. It sounds like you did. Did you do did you compare the actual expenses from the mailer to the model expenses generated at the 51.77%?
Yes, and that's where I had seen that one year they were a lot higher and then one year they were lower.
Okay.
So
That's with respect to the expenses I'm talking about.
yes, yeah, no,
Okay.
that's like this one year you could see on page 8, which was from 2022, expenses were a lot higher at 202,777. And again, I didn't do a stabilization on that, so I didn't comb through them exact. And then on the 2021 expenses were 166,912. So there was a significant jump in expenses and also lower rent garnered from the income. So I mean, again, usually in situations like this, especially these type of properties in these areas where there's a lot of rental market going on, that you know, is it being renovated, right? Like, did their expenses go up because they're running renovation and they're not getting as much income because they're renovating suites? So that's where I came back, that I felt the model net operating income at 162,272 was still okay.
And just turning to cap rate, the 5% falls within or between the 20th and 80th percentile. Is that based on, or can you comment on whether that's based on neighborhood size, condition? Or is that just like a model?
That's just purely model driven. So in this case, we go with it. I can explain, you know, the intricate details on why this one came up at 5. I mean, maybe it had to do with some of the area. I don't really know though.
Great, thank you. I don't have anything further. Mr. Smith, your evidence, please.
Yes, thank you. So I'd like to clarify a few things, and I'll start with renovation. The property isn't and wasn't under renovation. There's no contribution to vacancy and bad debt through renovation for the property. That's not an issue. That's something we probably could have discussed. Looking at the income and expense. So I mentioned this earlier at the beginning of our presentation, and I'd like to cover it again because it has happened where panel members didn't, my explanation perhaps did not get across in the first place. So having had many questions on this, I'd like to review it again. The income and expense information for the 3 properties that we're looking at. One we had a sale on, so we don't have that background from the same property manager, but the property management firm for these particular properties on an annual basis applies to RTB to get the maximum increase that they can for each unit that they have in the building. And when they're filling out the income and expense information, so I will direct you to the very last page of my brief.
Page 24.
That would be, I guess, page 24. It's A-4 on my numbering system here, but yeah, I think it's 24. So suite rental income. So this states, enter the following income information if property attached to income expense. Okay. Gross potential suite income at 100% occupancy. So what the property manager includes here is what they can potentially charge under the RTV because they've applied for these amounts. Now, that's what they could get at a very maximum, the 363.78. Now, they do that on an annual basis, and it essentially inflates what rent they could charge. Now, the benefit for them in that is that if our market significantly changes, there's very low vacancy, very high demand, then potentially they could charge that amount. But they've never been able to charge those amounts. It's simply a paper stat, essentially, if you will. That's not what they earn, and it's not what they can potentially generate. So if you flip back to my page A-2 and the annual income received. Now, this is also a projection. Residential apartment suite revenue there, 336,634. If you look, that is their fully occupied revenue for the property. That's what they're actually able to generate for the subject property. And they have not deducted bad debt or vacancy from that figure. So that's 100% occupancy at their rates that they're actually able to charge on the marketplace. That's what that is. So hopefully that's clear. If we look at the city's information where they had 2021 revenue of 349,705, and that's potential revenue at 100% occupancy versus the 336. Those are actual figures of what they could potentially generate at the rents that they actually charge in the marketplace. So there was a drop between 2021 and 2022 for the subject property, and it's not based on a renovation of the particular property either. So hopefully that clarifies that. Please keep that in mind with the other properties that we've already done. It's exactly the same setup in terms of how the income expense has been reported. It's been done that way by this property management firm for years. It's been discussed with the assessment department and various assessors over time, and it's accepted. So that is the background that you need to have in mind with regard to that particular information. Looking at page number 3, you have background information with regard to the assessment of the property. Property was originally built in 1971. We have a total of 29 units, 12 2-beds, 17 1-beds, fairly standard split. Photos begin on page 4. The property, I would say, is in average condition. It's not renovated. It has not been upgraded in any way. If you look at the photos on page number 6, you can see relatively standard kitchen, bathroom at the bottom, carpeting, etc. So we're not looking at a property that has been upgraded. Page number 8, just a bit of description with regard to the subject. Pretty standard walk-up. And again, not a property that has been renovated. The site is shown on page number 9. We have a total, I think, of 30 parking stalls for this particular property. And we can flip forward to page number 10. I'd like to point out the text at the top is in error. It was meant to be replaced, but wasn't, so please disregard that. You can see the location of the property in the map on the bottom of the page. So let's jump forward into the valuation itself. Actual 100% occupied revenue for the property under the rents that they do charge would be $336,634. The potential rent under RTB obviously is higher, which we've discussed. Overall average rental rate for the property is $967. The CMHC data is there at the bottom of the page. And we're using the gross rent of $336,634. Moving on to expenses. The subject property had vacancy of $5,373 and bad debt of $11,182 in the 2022 calendar year, totaling $16,555. That's a considerably higher vacancy rate than the market. Obviously, I won't say that they have that every year, but it is indicative of the subject property itself. We're not going with the actual vacancy for obvious reasons. That would be misleading as far as an overall valuation of the property. We've gone with the city vacancy rate of 2.6%, backed up by CMHC. But it is something to keep in mind in the overall valuation of the property. The expense allowance, page number 15, we've gone through the stabilization of 3-year history for the property. You can see how that is done. The results are there for you. So yes, there was a higher overall expenses in 2022. We're not running with 202,000. We have stabilized them. You run through how this was done. You can see that it's fair and equitable. So 159,000 in 2020, 2021 is 166,000, 2022, 202,000. And we have stabilized this at 175,745, shown on page 15. Moving forward, our capitalization rate information remains the same. We have the same ranges provided by the main commercial property brokerages in the city, that being Colliers and Cushman, both of them essentially stating the same low-rise cap rate range of 5 to 5.756%. 5% being the low end. This has been somewhat stable in prior years as well, prior cycles, as shown on page number 17. And another factor to keep in mind with regard to the current cycle is the increase in interest rates in the period leading up to the valuation date of Q1 2023. So obviously, if you have an increase in the rates that a purchaser is able to borrow at, that does have an impact on what they would be willing to pay for a property and what the resultant capitalization rate would be. Rising interest rates typically lead to either level and or increasing capitalization rates in the marketplace. So we have a property that is located where it is. I didn't go into great description with regard to the area, but we're on Monroe Street, well to the east. Again, a bit of a lower income area. It's not the same as our property on Johnson, but it is a bit of a lower income area. We have a property that has had very significant vacancy in the prior year. It's a property that is not updated. It's not a property that would, or an area that would draw significantly higher rents if it were to be updated. So when we look at the overall property and appropriate capitalization rate, again, we're using 5.5% for the subject property. Could that be higher? Potentially, but we're being conservative and using 5.5%. So this is summarized on page number 19. And applying the 5.5% to our NOI of 152,136 gives us our final market value of $2,766,000. And that is my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Michelop, questions?
Yeah, so just in regards to the income discussion that we have here regarding the rents, did you have a rent roll for this property that you could provide?
No, I do not have the rent roll for the property to provide.
Okay, just because like the 363,780 and then this amount here of the 336,634, that's a big gap, and a rent roll is really helpful in that situation on our end, because we don't know if that is to do with vacancy or if it has to do for some underlying issue. The rent roll will actually show that, hey, there's massive discounts being applied to this property, right? So I guess that's my question, and I guess going forward, is it possible for the owner to be submitting rent roll information, or the property manager to submit this information to us along with these income statements? Because I think that will help in the future with this property when we're at these discussions of going like, well, how is that the gross potential suite income 336,000 when you've just put on the other one 363,000, right?
Yeah. I certainly understand, yeah, and going forward, I will suggest to the property manager that they do include that rent roll so that you can verify the 336 versus.
Right, because we do,
363.
right, perfect, because we do ask for it when we do send out those requests for information. So if we're not, when we do request it and we're not being provided for it, that could also open up issues of non-compliance. And I don't want to have to go there, but we do ask for rent rolls. And in this situation, it would have been particularly helpful.
Yeah, I will certainly make that request of the property management.
Okay.
For this week.
Okay. Okay. And then just again, so regarding capitalization rate, can you confirm that these properties have been sold through land titles?
So as mentioned, I verified the information with regard to the sale of each of these properties. They're all based on the actuals of the actual income and expense for the subject properties as of the sale date. And I have verified that information with various market participants. I cannot categorically tell you that each and every one of these went through land titles, but certainly the majority of them did. There may be a share sale in there potentially.
And so there's no addresses associated with these.
No, that's incorrect. As I stated at the beginning, for confidentiality reasons, we did not provide, and this is a common practice, as you'll see with other agents in the market as well. We did not provide the actual address, but we do have that information before us today and are able to discuss that. And if we need to discuss it offline another time, certainly able to do that as well. But as one can understand, for confidentiality reasons, it's not included in that particular chart.
Okay. Those are all my questions.
Thank you. Ms. Knight, questions?
Can't really ask the question I want to, so I'm going to say no.
I'd be interested in knowing what that question was.
Yeah. We'll discuss that later.
Ms. Anderson, questions?
I have no questions at this time, Mr. Chair.
I do have a question with respect to perhaps a series of questions. And I appreciate your explanation of how the gross rental income was derived, the $336,634. And it is using that number that you have based all of the other expenses, deductions, the percentages and everything else. Is that fair to say? That's your starting. Now, looking at the actuals, however, is filed on your page 22, there is some other income. There's 336 gross rent or potential rent, residential apartment suites, but then there's an additional 13,389 other income leading to a total income. I'm wondering if that should have been included in your, I wonder if that's, would you agree that that should have been included in your calculations to determine the net operating income?
No, and I will explain that, and perhaps I should have mentioned that in my presentation. So if you look at that page.
I'm on page 22 on ours, yes.
So if you look at page 22 and you look at the annual income, $5,500 in storage revenue. I did ask the question and didn't get a response back in time with regard to the storage revenue. You don't see $5,500 in storage revenue at apartment buildings. You simply don't. You do see laundry, you do see parking, but I gather those are included in the overall top line. Otherwise, they would have been indicated in the spaces provided. If they had, this is a very diligent property manager. If they had laundry and parking revenue, it would be in there. So $5,500 in storage might be a one-off. Maybe they're allowing somebody to park a trailer on site, or I don't have any idea what that is, but it's non-standard and it would artificially inflate the revenue for the property. The other item there is forfeit, $78.85. Again, it's not revenue that you would typically have on any kind of ongoing basis. What was forfeited, I'm not sure whether that was damage deposits, contents of units. I really don't have an answer for you, but the $13,000 that you're looking at is not an ongoing source of revenue for property, and that's why I didn't include it. It would be misleading to include revenue sources that the property would not have on an ongoing basis. For instance, if they had a cell tower or something of that nature that they derived income from, well, that would be a different matter, but that's not what this is.
Okay, thank you. I don't have anything further with respect to this property. Mr. McCluck, any summary?
That's everything. Thank you. No summary.
Mr. Smith?
No, that's everything. Thank you very much, everyone. Appreciate your time.
That is the close of the last matter on the list. Having heard all the docket, we will, having heard all the matters scheduled, we will adjourn. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Want to take 5 minutes?
No.
Come back, start our deliberation, or you want to do it right now?
Just do it.